Hey everybody, Reuben at Lurssen Mastering, and today for Tech Tuesday I want to talk about gain structure. There's all different ways you can introduce your gain structure, your dynamic processing in the mastering process. And the way I've always done it is EQ into dynamic processing. I've always found a really great musical layer of dynamic processing right under digital zero. And based off how that dynamic processing is working and enveloping the signal, I'll EQ into that, blooming into that with EQ, finding a favorable shape that works musically with the shape of the dynamic processing. So there's all different types of ways you can introduce your layered lasagna of dynamic processing, some working a little harder, some working a little looser, depending on the dynamic content of the mix and what you're trying to achieve. But to break it down really, really simple, I'm just going to talk about two things in particular: limiting and clipping. So hypothetically, if I have 2 dB of limiting, and I like this limiter by the way, the Waves L2, it's a classic limiter. It sounds great, especially when you just do a little bit of threshold, like 2 dB. Let's just say I have 2 dB of threshold, and right before that I have an A to D converter. Just talking about the relationship between these two processes. If I EQ and gain up into the clipper and to the limiter, it's going to be enveloping the signal in a particular way. But if I come down even just 2/10 hypothetically, with this limiter, that means it's doing 2/10 less of threshold, less level, and then I gain up into that, I'm going to be hitting this A to D a little harder, clipping the signal. So this is just understanding just that alone, the relationship between the converter and the limiter and how far each one is working, is a big part of the sound. So if I have 2/10 less threshold on the limiter, that means I'm going to be hitting that A to D harder. Sometimes that's really useful for getting like punchy drums, working on metal records, something that's you really want to hit hard without any kind of movement in terms of compression. Can hit that limiter really hard, clip the converter, and kind of choke it by not getting as much level post that converter. So you could spend a whole year playing with gain structure, maybe even more, between just these two alone, and develop opinions based off the characteristics of tinkering it that way or this way. Anyway, a little bit more into the relationship between clipping and limiting.